all the musicians, the music fit our day beautifully. It wasn't, they were great. They were great. And we thank everyone for sharing your lunches. The chocolate peanut butter cookies were a smash. So thank you to whoever brought those. So, everybody's nurtured well, everybody comfortable, everybody can hear. So I have a tendency to move without the microphone, so sorry if that happened this morning. Okay, so we are up to the new rule, 1223. After Francis found out a lot of the guys were getting cabin fever, they wanted to branch out, especially in education. So we know that Francis really went through a lot at that time and had to let go a lot at that time. So to let go of the order that he founded as the head, so when he passed the torch first to Peter, but I don't, if anybody knows anything about Peter, what happened in those 6 years that he suddenly died, and so then Brother Elias comes. So,
was that 6 years or 6 months, sister?
I thought wasn't 6 months, I think.
It said 6 months.
Yes, it said months, that's right. It was 6 months. Any people in leadership, take care of your health. So, Francis has had a lot of heartache. So in 1224, why we are celebrating in 2024 his experience of the stigmata. So Francis planned to make a 40-day retreat. So he was going to Mount Laverna. That was this beautiful place, but it was pretty desolate, and it was about a mile and a half away from Assisi. So at Mount Laverna, one morning he was praying on the mountainside. That's Thomas of Solano. Others say he was in a cave. Do we know? No. So just image Francis, who is praying with the crucifixion, Christ's love, deeply wanting to be one with Christ. And so what happens is he saw something, a vision. Now this is Thomas of Solano. A vision of a crucified man in the middle of wings with stretched out hands and feet nailed to a cross. Right then, the marks of the nails began to appear in Francis's body. Now that's the story that Thomas of Solano writes. No one was there with him. No one knew. We know that the intensity of this mystical experience did not help improve his already failing health. So, we have many artists' rendition of the stigmata. But as time goes on, Bonaventure, who was just a young boy when Francis was active, so he comes and says, I want to learn a whole lot from you guys who were with Francis at the beginning. So then they tell their story, how they remember it. So will we ever really know? So some writers say, if you think about when Francis was in San Damiano Church, and am I in the right church? Where the crucifix spoke to him. Yeah. Okay. You read so much and then your brain goes crazy. So don't read so much. So he's there. He hears, rebuild my church. Now, I don't know about you, but when you pray, and I hope all of you follow Francis, find some time during your day just to be quiet and listen to God. So, I used to pray and I would hear God say, don't forget your exam papers. Oh, and they were buried under something. I would have gone off without them. So I think we all have moments when we hear God's voice. So I think that's what Francis experienced. Rebuild my church. But now this is getting much more serious. Francis is meditating on the Passion, and this is around the Feast of the Exaltation of the Cross. And he had a mystical vision of a seraph, an angel, and then had the appearance of the stigmata. Now that is the story. No one was there. Francis never talked about it. So the question is, what might have happened during this mystical moment and how it came to be written by Thomas of Solano? Now, at that time, this is Middle Ages, they were very much into angels, and they were very much into serpents. And they know that the word serpent and seraph come so similar. So then they think, was there, like, when Moses holds up the bronze serpent, and then all the pharaohs have bronze serpents, or at least a picture of a serpent in their headdress. They were the symbol for wholeness, for health, good fortune. Seraph, as angel, could, we know at the Annunciation of the Blessed Mother, it's written that an angel appeared and spoke to her. So, I'm not saying that each of us have heard an angel, but we might have. I always think it's my mother saying, don't forget this, or don't, take that on. And see, and they kind of failed me, but they got the message last night. Bring the clicker that would click these the pictures. They told me, whoever it is, I don't know, but I forgot it. I did forget it. So my dear soul here is just doing a great job. So Francis's inner desire, we know, was to be Christ. Could he have caused his wounds from the inside out rather than from something from the outside? Now, this question, I tell you, I brought a couple, but if there are 25 books written since 1970 about this, some people say he had leprosy. And it was the leprosy that got worse while because he was up there for 40 days. So others think that, did he, from the inside out, long so deeply to be one with Christ that he was like Christ? So then some writers have actually even said, was it psychosomatic? So psychosomatic means what you think brings about a soma, some physical bodily thing. Could he have longed for that oneness with Christ that he had from the inside out, the stigmata? Now, there's places, where they say, there was like his skin came out. His skin came out. So, will we ever know? I don't know. But I'll tell you, there are some pretty convincing books. This one is called The Stigmata of Francis of Assisi, New Studies, New Perspectives, by a Frenchman who is a, historian, Jacques Bellerin. Another one, Michael Cusato. Now, when you read these, they're written in English, they're translated. The footnotes are all in French. Not helpful. And then a Carla Salvati. So these three each have an article that was published, then they put into book form. It's fascinating, it really is. But driving here today, my chauffeur, my dear Jan, said, well, somebody gave me this new book. It was not new, 2014. Have any of you seen Francis the Leper, Faith, Medicine, Theology, and Science by Joanne Schlatzlein? We all know Joanne. She's a nurse. Dan Sulmasy, Sulmasy. Anybody know him? Dan Sulmasy? They had this book that explains, and Dan is a medical doctor. So if you don't believe me that this could be a possibility, they will convince you. And the beautiful thing with this book, I was always looking for dates to make sure I had the right dates. In the middle of this book, they've got all the dates we're talking about. So this is a great little book. You would have to probably get it from Amazon, but it's a good one. So, what we do know for sure is that we each are called to be a mystic. And some of you maybe have heard the name Evelyn Underhill. She lived 1875 to 1944 in England. She was Anglican, but she loved Catholicism. So she actually calls herself an Anglo-Catholic. She coined the phrase, Christing the world. Christing the world. And she wrote many books on mysticism. They're beautiful. So if we do nothing after we leave today, you just walk and say, I am Christing the world. I, in my little way, am Christing the world. So, how many of you have ever heard of Father Tom Spires? Yes.
I know it.
How many of you have ever lived with Tom Spires? So, Tom Spires up and died July 4th, 2023. Just 1 year ago. Now, as we look at some of these ways of thinking about this, Tom Spires gave classes on this new thought that possibly the stigmata came from the inside out. So let's take the next slide. And sometime, now, Brother Leo was not there at that moment of whatever happened, whatever Francis heard, whatever Francis embodied, something transformed Francis. So what we do know is if you find the paper that had your prayer on this morning that looks like this. So they are up on Mount Laverna. And we do know that Francis asked Brother Leo for a piece of paper. And Francis wrote this pattern down here. If you look, if anybody knows Latin real well or Italian, when this happened, Francis wrote on the piece of paper the blessing, the Lord bless and keep you, the Lord show his face to you. That's this top part here in black. Also on here is the handwriting of St. Francis that shows something down here. And the study people say this is the head of the Sultan. Francis had just gotten back. He heard that they were starting a 6th crusade to go back and kill the Muslims. Francis was very afraid that his good friend, the Sultan, could be killed. He wanted to pray. That's why he went up the mountain. He was praying for his Muslim friends. So what he draws on here is a head, and they even say it has whiskers because the Sultan did, and that when Francis was with him, he felt that the Sultan really embodied Christianity. And so he has the tau that is the symbol coming from the Sultan's skull. So then they analyze this line here. It looks like an F, so that could be brother, friar. And then Leo, L-E-O on the other side. So what they think is this little piece was the message for Leo, and the bigger blessing up here was for the Sultan. And he wanted Leo to be praying for them. So we don't know. But then Leo put some red writing on these. He dates it. He says when these 40 days started and ended. That's the top part. He says something in the middle. My cheat sheet's gone. Here it is. So he okay. But anyway, so did Leo write this now on Mount Laverna? People think Saint Bonaventure was wondering about the first friars. So he comes to Brother Leo and says, Leo, I need to know what happened. I need to know the stories. And so some of the writers now think, because the red is so unworn, whereas the rest is more worn, that Leo wrote this like in 1260 when Bonaventure asked the early friars, tell me more. So we don't know, but we do know that these beautiful prayers are here. And then on the opposite side, let's flip that next slide. Okay, so down there where it says Francis composed the praises of God on the reverse side. So the praises of God are what our musicians taught us the refrain, and they sang the verses. So that is at the top of this paper. So what was Francis's joy, his excitement, his being in awe of whatever it was that he experienced, that oneness with Christ. So he writes on the other side of this little paper these praises of God. Now, the writers think, see, he was so impressed with the Muslims because when they pray, they bow to Mecca. They pray 5 times a day. They ring bells. You know, he was very much taken by their faith. So some writers think that he had prayed the 99 names for God that the Muslims pray and sing. So that's why his praises of God are like the 99 names. So let's look at one more. So just so you know, this would have been like the prayers the Muslims prayed about God. So God the most or entirely merciful, God the bestower of mercy, the king and owner of dominion, the absolute pure, perfect giver of peace, all these 99 names. So Francis is kind of embodying that mode. And so he then prays these praises. So it all kind of makes sense because Francis was so touched by the Crusades and the Muslims. So will we know? I don't know. But you know, these books that tell us what might have happened, who was there. This conclusion from Crusato says the stigmata connects with Francis's 1219 trip to Damietta in Egypt. Jesus lifted up on the cross for the healing of the whole world through non-violence. And see, Francis was so opposed to the violence, which pained Francis so deeply in that 5th crusade. On Laverna, Francis was praying for healing for his Muslim brothers, especially the Sultan, because a new crusade, the 6th crusade, was scheduled for June 1225, the next year. The person in charge had already done lots of preparations. It was a go. And poor Francis, he is distressed by all that. So we can understand how this affected him so much. So we do know, I'm going to catch up. Went through a lot of this stuff here. Okay, so we do know that Francis's life, whatever transpired, enabled him to let loose with a more joyful heart from being the head of the Franciscan order. He could let others do that. He had an openness of freedom that allowed him to go on with his life. Next slide. So, 1225, stigmata's over. Francis made trips. Now, he is a sickly human. So he would ride a donkey, and they would lead him. Whoever was with him, they would walk beside him and lead him. And periodically, he would have to rest. So does that sound like some of us? So any of you have rollators? Periodically, you just have to rest. So we know that Francis continued. He went down to the Rieti Valley and was getting medical treatment for his eyes. Now, the medical treatment is horrible. I mean, they cut from his ear to his eyeball. Then they went in and they chopped his ear. And then, I mean, it sounds terrible. And they give it vividly in these works, Thomas of Celano. So, but we do know that after he left Mount Laverna, he traveled to the lepers at Borgo San Sepolcro. And that town was noted for its lepers. Then he went on to another hermitage nearby, spent a month praying. Finally, he comes home, but he would travel trying to spread God's word. And, you know, they said he did spread it by his example, not so much by his words. And so people would say that about him. I was just with him. Well, what did he say? I don't know. He was just there. So that presence was so vivid. How are we doing time-wise? Okay, so let's, next year, same time, same place, we will look at the canticle of Brother Son and Francis's death and resurrection. So next year, the next chapter. So let's go to the next slide. And let's just do a little quick review of how